You guys really seem to like me calling my audience a bunch of poopy dum-dums the first time around, so obviously, we gotta do ourselves a part 2. Now, like last time, there will be a fair bit of takes here that I actually find a lot of agreement with. They just so happen to be hot-button topics that have a wide range of viewpoints among different community members. That is, until I make my opinion known, because 80% of you are sheep, and I'm the sexiest shepherd on the farm. I think you all get it by now. Bring on the opinions. If Valve ever updates the game again, there shouldn't be any more Australiums added. I feel like we have enough, and adding any more would take away from their status. I actually understand that rationale. A lot of people have asked for an Australium variant of pretty much every weapon in the game, and I've always thought of that as massive overkill. Like when we get to the point where we're coding shit like the Razorback or the Hot Hand in gold, you're just devaluing the Australium qualifier entirely. That being said, I still do want another generation of Australiums. There are so many iconic TF2 weapons that don't have Australium variants already, and they really should have them, arguably over many of the ones we have today. Plus, on the off chance that Valve ever decides to bundle a few community missions together and make a tour out of it, new Australiums would get everyone rushing to the door. Everything you could possibly need is there and ready to go at a moment's notice. The missions? Already done. The Australium redesigns? Already done. The funneling mechanism a la the seasonal crates? Already done. And you just know that TF2bers past and present would jump at the opportunity to give Valve some free advertising. It is the most brain-dead, obvious update idea in the world, and I hope that one day Valve gives it a chance. Explosive backstabs is actually a good idea for fixing Spy. Spy is in desperate need of crowd control, and this gives it to him. He also only gets 1 or 2 stabs in before he draws aggro, so he essentially has a built-in cooldown for whenever he can use it. There is a world where this design concept works and works well, but you can't port over the damage multipliers from the explosive headshot upgrade and expect it to be balanced whatsoever. Yes, Spy only gets a few stabs in before zooming away in his Deadringer shell, but what happens if the AoE damage is enough to wipe out all the crowd single-handedly? Having a cooldown doesn't mean shit if it's only elapsing during periods of downtime where you're waiting for some fresh bots to drop down. I think if you kept the AoE output low, like say 50 damage a stab, that would still allow Spy to put out some good AoE damage while keeping him balanced and rewarding more risky positioning. You can get 2 stabs in, not get any kills via the explosion, but safely retreat out of there, or you can shoot for a 3 to 4 chain stab, a much riskier play given how fast the robots lock onto you, but if you pull it off, you'll wipe out any horde that isn't comprised of small robot heavies. Actually, the more I think about this idea, the more I kinda like it. Spy's main issue is that anytime a giant isn't in play, he's just kinda spinning his wheels. Getting backstabs on small individual robots that are already half dead is just extremely unengaging. Either give him a decent crowd control game, or give him a money magnet so he can do something in the meantime. Because as of right now, Spy just isn't cutting it for the average player. Almost everyone is against random crits at this point, but so many people think they should be kept in MvM. It's hypocritical to whine about them in the base game while also seeing it as objectively good in PvE. What? No. Random crits are still an extremely contentious topic in the community. The debate around them is nowhere near settled. Take that from me, a multi-thousand-hour soldier main who can pull godlikes out of his ass like candy. I happen to like them very much, actually. But even if you find yourself in the anti-crit cohort, it's not hypocritical to prefer them in PvE. By and large, TF2 players like random crits when they're the beneficiary, but hate them when they're on the other end of that bargain. Man vs. Machine does not have this problem. No human player is on the ass end of a random crit exchange, ever. Even the argument of devaluing skill progression as a concept just doesn't really pertain to MvM all that much. There's so much upgrade power creep within the game mode that crits are basically a non-factor in deciding as to whether or not you'll win or lose a particular encounter. This, again, is unlike in PvP, where at the very least there's a case to be made. It's not a repudiation of values when the variables at play say are innately different. I wouldn't be too quick to call hypocrisy on this one. Engineers who don't know what they're doing and refuse to acknowledge your pleas are the most infuriating teammates, apart from griefers, to play with. Not necessarily because they're useless, but the mere sight of a dispenser on the ground next to a sentry makes my heavy main blood boil. Oh yeah, hogging the dispenser all to yourself instead of placing it in an area where your teammates will use it is one of the biggest etiquette failures within the game mode by far. It is literally the epicenter of basically every class's fundamental game plan. Without one in the appropriate position, everyone needs to fall back and fight over ammo boxes, all while the robots continue to pour in. Most of the time, it's an honest mistake, and if you ask a new engineer to move it, they'll usually oblige. But unfortunately, that call is nowhere near 100% of the time. This is another reason I don't really subscribe to the hardcore, let people play how they want mentality. Because when playing how you want ends up creating easily avoidable problems for every single one of your other teammates in a cooperative game mode, mind you, it then ceases to become a virtue. And if you get kicked for being a selfish little dispenser whore and refuse to move it up when asked, your 5 other teammates are under no obligation to keep you around. Two Cities is boring. Missions like Steel Trap and Gear Grinder provide a variety of maps to keep the brain stimulated. Okay, so this one I've actually come around to over time, in no small part due to needing to constantly grind out missions for background footage. Personally, I love Two Cities. Manhattan and Rottenburg are my forever maps, and I do think they allow for the most interesting team compositions. Stacking multiple heavies and shooting forward is much less practical there. That being said, in the past year or so, the gap has definitely closed for me. Not really for Steel Trap, because that tour's 6 missions long and fuck that noise, but the added variety of Gear Grinder is definitely a huge bonus. Two Cities is definitely fun, but oftentimes you're just kinda holding the same chokes over and over. Ditto with Mecha if you have a sniper. Gear Grinder is different, and not only are there 3 different maps, but because they're all expert difficulty missions, you're usually getting pushed back to multiple different sections of them. So there are more maps to play on, and when you do, you're fighting on a higher percentage of terrain than you are on other tours. It's something I've come to appreciate, and I've been queuing it a fair bit more than I used to. I think canteens, ammo, Uber, and crits shouldn't exist in MvM. They're a waste of credits, and an NG/medic can do their job without having to spend the extra credits. Anyone claiming that canteens are a waste of credits, I'm just going to assume they don't know how the game mode works. In fact, crit and upgrade canteens are often touted as being overpowered for how they can single-handedly bypass any risk in playing too recklessly. It is true that medic and NG can fulfill the roles of crit boosting, Uber charge, and ammo relief throughout the mission, but that doesn't tell the whole story. Medic can only use one type of medigun and only Uber one player at a time, and the engineer's dispenser can sometimes be too far away or not in play to begin with. This is what makes ammo canteens well worn in the early game. It lets you go hyper aggro as heavy, lets you keep camping on your perch as sniper, and lets you cover a flank route all by yourself as a soldier without needing to worry about retreating for ammo. Crit canteens are also a godsend, letting you deal with every single massive threat in the game at your own discretion without needing to rely on a fully charged crit screen. Uber canteens are also extremely useful, particularly on classes with high risk profiles like Pyro, Spy, and even Scout wants them every once in a while for some extra insurance and collecting stray cash. And need I mention the Medic's Canteen Specialist upgrade, which lets you share all of these perks on command at a discounted price. Canteens are broken. Everyone should be learning how to maximize them. People who hate on idle rocking have no critical thinking skills. It doesn't sap the fun out of the game as hard as gas does. Oh, you're one of those people. My first intuition was to label this as bait, but I know there's a shockingly large amount of high tours who have this same opinion. I've never Rancho Relaxo'd an entire mission due to a gas pyro on my team. I have, however, done that multiple times when a sniper opts to speedrun a big rock mission. Giving idle rocking a pass when you'd never grant the same courtesy to a gas user is the most brain-dead cope that has infested the game mode, and it's good to see people recognizing that double standard more and more. War Thunder is the greatest game of all time. Hey, wait a second. That's right, this video is sponsored by War Thunder, the most intense, action-packed vehicle combat game out there. Freely available on PC, console, and more recently, mobile devices too. Tanks, planes, helicopters, ships, over 2,500 of them, spanning 10 major nations. Ranging from the biplanes and armored cars of a century's past to the fighter jets and modern battle tanks of today. Every vehicle is modeled down to its individual components, like engines, weapons, fuel tanks, and crew members, all susceptible to damage from enemy fire. But fear not, because with War Thunder's top right X-ray vision peripheral, you'll know exactly where the shell hit and what precisely got whacked. But it wouldn't be a vehicle combat game without customization, and War Thunder's got that down. Decorations, camouflages, historical markings, including designs made by the game's very own community, all bolstered by the realistic modeling and authentic sound design intrinsic to War Thunder's style. I'd recommend trying as many playstyles as you can. War Thunder's got enough content to keep you loaded for hours. That's why War Thunder has a worldwide community of over 70 million players. And whether you prefer PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile, War Thunder will be there completely free of charge. And by using my links in the pinned comment or video description, new players or returning players who haven't played for at least 6 months on PC and consoles will receive a large bonus pack containing the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium account status. Thank you very much to War Thunder for the video sponsor. Back to your bad opinions. Two-way tele isn't actually that useful, as the only class for whom kill binding back is detrimental is also the fastest to reach the shop on foot. Again, I'm convinced that anyone with this opinion just doesn't know how the game mode works. Now granted, this one does have a bit more legs. New players will often never use the two-way tele even if you buy it, so on a shittier team, it's pretty much chucking credits into the void. But the rationale for this claim was that every class can kill bind without any detriments, and that just isn't true. Scout loses money overheal, Soldier loses banner charge and airstrike heads, Pyro loses gas and flog charge, Demo sticky traps get deleted alongside any Eyelander heads, Medic loses both shield and uber charge, Sniper loses Heatmaker focus, and the Engie's buildings are left defenseless while he's stuck in the spectator jail. But also, it usually isn't even faster unless you buy back instantaneously, which just ends up trashing thousands of credits across all of your teammates over the course of a mission. The way I see it, two-way teleporter is always as optimal as your team wants it to be. You can buy some extra crit res before a giant drops, increase your damage by 25%, buy a crit canteen for added wipe protection. Two-way teleporter bounces around between being completely pointless and one of the most broken upgrades in the game. Where it lands on that continuum is entirely at your team's own discretion. The prejudice towards low tours is justified. People don't want to risk dealing with potentially bad teammates who might not ever listen to their advice. Prejudice is a bit of a strong word, but apprehension? I would agree with that. I don't think most MvM onlookers realize just how common it is for a new player to do something that negatively affects the entire team, and despite repeated attempts at communicating, they just don't listen. The aforementioned dispenser hogging is a great example, but even things like spamming air blast or shooting uber medics become unbearable when done repeatedly, especially when your entire team is pleading to cut it out. Like, you might think this is a rare 1% occurrence, but ask any high tour in the biz, and they'll confirm it's way more prevalent than people think. The fear isn't that new players will make mistakes. That comes with being new, and most players are completely understanding of that. It's making the mistakes, refusing to correct the mistakes, killing all the fun for everybody involved, and then acting defiant and butthurt when it turns out people don't really like playing with you that much. I think this applies to both ends, by the way. Low tours are more likely to fuck shit up and not listen to reason, so high tours are apprehensive about playing with them. But also, high tours are more likely to be easy to anger with a hair trigger temper, so low tours are apprehensive defensive about them. At the end of the day, the best way to reduce the stigma in both directions is to call out bad behavior wherever you see it. Do that enough times, and the player base will naturally weed out the bad apples. The rage upgrade for Heavy's minigun should be reworked to spray out a huge burst of bullets for massive damage. In principle, I like giving the Heavy some kind of offensive cooldown that would give his damage output the occasional heft, but realistically, crit canteens fill that niche well enough. Knockback Rage to me isn't even poorly designed beyond grounded push force not being included with every point of the upgrade, and also having it reset when you die. I don't think that's necessary at all. Sure, using knockback is definitely more of a hindrance than a benefit in the vast majority of situations, but you gotta remember the upgrade is a product of its time. Back in the early 2010s, missions were harder. Players weren't as good, refunds weren't infinite, credit bonuses were A+ or bust, and metas were much less refined. Getting pushed back to the hatch or the Manhattan gates was a much more common occurrence back when MvM was still finding its footing. In the current day, however, it's a textbook noob trap. New players constantly activated in situations where it does nothing but give everyone more damage falloff and reduce the Heavy's damage overall. If new MvM players become conscious of those pitfalls, I don't really have any issue with the upgrade in its current state on a fundamental design level. It just needs a bit of tuning. The Bison is an underappreciated secondary, so as it pertains to an optimal soldier, not really. You'll always have something left to upgrade on your rocket launcher or resistance tab before you hit the credit cap, and every banner in the game will synergize well with those upgrades much more than the Bison will. However, the Bison Soldier, as far as meme classes go, dwarfs every single subclass in not just its power, but fun as well. In that respect, it is definitely underappreciated. Everyone should try out the Bison Soldier at least once. I'll run it pretty often in the late game alongside the Rocket Jumper for funsies. It's a loadout you can goof around with and not feel like that much of a burden. Replace Oil Spill, it's completely pointless. Fuck replacing it, just remove it entirely at this point. Oil Spill is one of the biggest scams in the game, rivaling the default weapon prices on the in-game shop. The entire purpose of the mission is to fool unsuspecting players who don't know any better into losing money on a shitty, inferior version of the product that they're actually looking for. Almost no one intends to play Oil Spill with full knowledge of what they're getting themselves into. In fact, I'd argue that even on a monetary level, this hurts Valve. How many people are queuing into Oil Spill accidentally and have to suffer through a 30-minute queue time alongside unengaging missions for no chance at an Australian, by the way, and immediately write off the entire game mode as not worth playing? I don't know what the average ARPU is for the average MvM player, but whatever the margin, they're likely losing more money in player drop-off from Oil Spill's awful first impression than they are gaining money from the people buying tickets explicitly to play this one tour. Oil Spill is a fucking scam. Do not make the mistake of ever playing it. Players should consider their scout's positioning and travel distance when killing robots, whether that means picking up the money themselves or not killing the robot. Okay, so this one's less of a hot take and more of an underappreciated one. If you kill a stray robot somewhere behind your team, always pick up the money. If you kill a spy while you're coming out of spawn, always pick up the money. Kill a robot in a more unorthodox location, always pick up the money. While Scout is the main money collector for the team, that's not a hard and fast rule. He can't be everywhere all at once. Scout should never be backtracking halfway through the map to collect money that your teammates were too lazy to pick up. If it's easily in view, help your Scout out and grab it while you can. Give Scout the ability to see cash through walls, but maybe lower his pickup range a bit. I wouldn't mind that. You already have X-ray vision for bomb carriers. I don't see why faraway money would be a problem either. You don't even need to balance it out by nerfing his pickup range. I don't think he needs to lose anything for this basic quality of life addition. Valve removing the ability to see teammates' upgrades was a good move. No one wants to be told what to buy or how to play. Anyone who claims to be helping teammates by backseating their upgrades is bossy and obnoxious. To me, this is a radical oversimplification of what actually played out in real time. So for those who don't know, you used to be able to inspect the upgrades of your fellow teammates. This was patched in 2021 after TacoBot gained much more notoriety. Funnily enough, this patch actually was the motivation for me starting up this channel, but that is entirely due to how much damage it did to the new MvM player experience. It used to be the case that veteran players could offer helpful suggestions to newer ones whenever a faux pas was made that could negatively impact the team. Things like not buying dispenser range, not buying explode on ignite, not buying projectile shield, not buying explosive headshot. All of this was easily accessible information right from the jump that alleviated any potential problems before they happened. Now, because checking teammate upgrades is disabled, veteran players have to go through 18 different fucking dialogue trees with each and every LOTOR they come across in order to replicate the exact same coaching that they were able to do way easier beforehand. And you know what happens now? They fuck off. They don't try. Experienced players, even the chillest, most helpful ones in the game, will often leave lobbies that have one too many noobs present because Valve decided to quadruple the amount of time it takes to help them out. And thanks to this newly minted communication barrier, the new meta, the new path of least resistance, is leaving new players out to dry instead of pointing them in the right direction. Did this patch achieve its goal of reducing toxicity? Well, technically, yeah. Anytime you kill off any communication venue between players, you'll necessarily remove all the occasional toxic encounters that come with it. So in that respect, mission accomplished. But this is textbook cutting off your nose to spite your face. Frankly, even the benefits of this are heavily overstated, because drama isn't removed, it's just kicked down the road until someone gets a face full of the problems in real time, usually in the middle of the first or second wave. So now, a lot of players just end up leaving because it's not in their best interest to stick around. And even the players who do stick around, who theoretically could be toxic, you're not eliminating the toxicity, you're just delaying it. And again, all of those potential issues that lead to the dramas that happen later on could be sorted out and fixed within 60 seconds of the group being formed. This was an extremely useful tool for newer players trying to get better at the game. Ever wonder why a high tor is doing so much damage? You can easily check. Ever buy an upgrade that could significantly help the whole team? Someone can easily tell you. Ever have a teammate that accidentally bought an upgrade that literally doesn't work even 10 years later? That would be good to find out, and find out early. The first question a new MvM player will almost always ask is, what should I upgrade? And this is why I wholly reject the idea that advising a new player is inherently toxic behavior, even when unprompted. Almost every new player doesn't want to cause unnecessary problems for the team. They don't want to be a burden on the people they're playing with. They just need proper guidance. Guidance that Valve has made much more difficult to pass around. If you want my extended thoughts on this topic, I made an 18-minute long video on it like a year and a half ago. I'll tag it at the end of the video, so go watch it then if you're interested. All bots should wear banana hats and make their hitboxes impossible to gauge. Well, that's one way to nerf explosive headshot. Roam vision is not a good option to equip. Oh hey, here's another way of nerfing explosive headshot. So, roam vision is the feature that gives all the enemy robots fancy hats to wear, which is great if your team doesn't have a sniper, bad if your team does. Pretty much the only effect on gameplay is negative, so I'd have to agree on this one. Bot killers look way cooler than Australiums. The jiggle bones on the robot heads alone are enough to make me never want to equip them ever. I see a lot of sentiment around Heavy being boring because he's easy. I don't see that. Yeah, he's heavy, but he doesn't have to be difficult to play to be fun. Sometimes it's just fun mowing down a group of robots without giving a shit. I completely agree. I fundamentally reject the idea that a class has to be mechanically dense for them to be enjoyable, and Heavy in MvM is the best case study for that. All you do is move and shoot. Hold W for higher risk, higher reward. Hold S for lower risk, lower reward. And you know what? That's all he needs to be fun. Resistances before damage upgrades as Pyro. It's not an awful trade, but as you get better at the game, you kind of realize that Pyro actually doesn't take too much damage if you know how to weave aggro properly. In the case of a full group of small robots, you'll typically get 1 or 2 locked onto you regardless, but most of the time, health on kill will keep you alive no problem. I do like to juggle resistances and damage upgrades on Pyro more so than basically every other class, but the best way to keep yourself safe as Pyro is to only take fights you know you can handle. Once you have a good intuition of when to go in and when to tap out, you'll benefit much more from damage upgrades than anything else. And even if you do miscalculate the situation, well, that's what gas is for. 2 cities shouldn't be the most profitable tour 100% of the time. That 100% of the time qualifier is an interesting caveat because it does make me wonder how rotating loot tables on a weekly basis would play out. It would have the added benefit of incentivizing new players to try out the other tours, but there are a lot of 2 cities loyalists out there, and I don't think they'd be all too happy about their main tour getting a sizable downgrade in profitability. Probably best to leave things as they are, but I do wonder what the consensus would be if MvM started off like this from the beginning. Ultra controversial take, man versus machine toxicity is a good thing, as it separates the wheat from the chaff. The players who actually want to improve and get good at the game will power through it, while the bad players who don't want to improve will get discouraged and quit. It's a trial by fire, only the strongest will survive. Bro, this isn't fucking Avatar. How much of a fucking fantasy land do you have to live in to believe that culturally enforced toxicity is somehow a virtue? That's a one-way ticket to creating an environment so intolerable that no one without masochistic tendencies would ever want to get involved. I'm not even one of these hardcore anti-gatekeepers. I think gatekeeping often needs to happen, but basing it on whether or not you have enough resolve to stomach dealing with emotionally stunted man-children every other mission, I don't think that's a metric that should be subject to a fucking purity test. Get real. Like, fuck any discussion of morality or ethics because, quite frankly, I don't care. On a purely practical level, everyone has an interest in the MvM player base remaining alive and healthy. In order for this to continue long term, you need new players giving the game mode a shot. You can address player issues that negatively affect the team without being a screeching monkey over it. It's not that serious. You guys are fucking weird. I am of the opinion that high tour toxicity is over-exaggerated by low tours and is instead a symptom of people just butting heads for the sake of it. Felt like we needed a palate cleanser because, yes, I 100% agree. Players like that last guy are an incredibly small portion of the MvM community. The vast majority of high tours are completely calm, undramatic players who just want to chill and farm robots on their off hours. I do kind of disagree with the whole butting heads for the sake of it part. There are genuine, real divisions that can manifest between high tours and new players, but most people sort it out amicably or just leave and find another group. The rage bait you find on YouTube, it's nowhere near as common as you'd be led to believe. The Sandman with the Mark on Hit upgrade becomes a better fan of war, since the Mark for Death upgrade applies to both the ball and the melee. When people upgrade the Sandman with the Mark for Death effect, they're only seeing the newfound upside of being able to mark from range. What they don't see is what you're giving up for it, be it higher damage, higher resistances, or higher mobility, all three of which are more useful than long-range marking. It does let you get more uptime with your scattergun on giants because you can apply the debuff while running in instead of wasting time switching weapons at close range, but that's usually only like a second and a half of DPS loss on the occasional giant, whereas the baseline damage upgrades will do more for you over the long run. It's not a bad upgrade, but it's only a strict upgrade in a vacuum. Compared to everything else you can spend your money on, it won't come out ahead the vast majority of the time. Uber canteens on Medic are way too overrated. I understand why medics use Uber canteens. It lets them farm a full crit streak charge via the Uber Saw risk-free, and with maxed out Uber duration, you'll have 14 seconds of crits compared to the canteen's 5-second baseline. For me personally, I prefer to spam crit canteens to alleviate all threats as opposed to min-maxing the technical highest amount of uptime possible via the crit streak. Frankly, I don't really know if it's considered overrated or underrated, but what I do know is I prefer crit canteens to Uber almost every single time. MvM is a fun idea for an alternative game mode held back by its gambling aspect. MvM would have been much more popular and welcoming for new players if encouragement of gambling and farming for items like Australiums simply never became a thing. It's like half and half there. I agree that it would be more welcoming. Lower stakes naturally lead to less conflict overall, and Bootcamp definitely has a more favorable reputation than Man Up in that regard. More popular though, definitely not. Bootcamp as a game mode would definitely improve if there was more harmony between skill levels, and yes, that likely would lead to an increase in players wanting to try it out. But it would come at the expense of the entire slot machine baby side of the Man Up community tapping out of the game entirely. That surplus of players would not nearly be enough to make up for that exodus. Not in a million years. Add skill-based matchmaking, but with tour counts. I can foresee a lot of people, high tours and low tours alike, actually championing this change, which I find kinda sad, to be honest. The obvious problem here is balance. If you have a bunch of shitty 3-tour demo night mains, they'll never finish the mission. But on the other hand, if you have a full lobby of high tour poop sockers, imagining a bear will eat them if they don't clear bot bash in 22 minutes, they're gonna burn it down with no challenge whatsoever. That alone makes it dead on arrival, but I also just think it's good for MvM players of all skill levels to coexist and intertwine. In fact, when I was a new player, I loved playing with high tours. I knew there'd probably be some cool tech I could recognize and later try out, and I knew I wouldn't be spending an hour with a group that doesn't know how to block a super scout. I know a lot of MvM updates in recent years have done a lot to dissuade the commingling between different skill levels, and in my opinion, it's probably been the worst thing to happen to the game mode over time. But I really don't think doubling down on that philosophy in the modern day is the right call either. High tours sticking to their own don't often speak to each other because they don't have to, and low tours sticking to their own often do talk a fair bit, but it's usually related to the frustrations of the mission not going in a positive direction. There's a healthy balance that produces much more enjoyable player interactions, and I wish it was encouraged a lot more. But let's end this video on a high note. MvM is a more enjoyable experience with a bunch of friends than regular TF2 is. In terms of what's the largest delta between the multiplayer experience and the single player experience, I think MvM easily wins out. It's applicable to most multiplayer games, but man vs. machine especially. If you want to have the most amount of fun, I'd say invite a few buddies along for the ride. Plus, if you do encounter a hostile shitbag, you'll have vote kick majority to get him out of the game. And that's pretty cool too. So, there it is. A full hour's worth of yapping about controversial MvM takes. Don't expect a part 3 because there's only so much to talk about without spoiling half of my future content, so call it here we must. Again, thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring the video. Links in the description to get you started there. PC, PlayStation, Xbox, mobile, it's available everywhere, so may as well give it a shot. And as always, thank you all for watching the video. Twitter, Discord, and second channel are in the description. In-depth videos on Australium ideas and the inspec chain should be on screen right now, and that's all I got. See ya.